In order for your product to be successful, you need to build your foundations right. And nobody builds the foundations the same way, but there is lots of common patterns across the board.
Welcome to the /podcast, where we lean into the future of IT by inviting fellow thought leaders, innovators, and problem solvers to slash through its complexity. I'm your host, James Carman, and today we're talking to Ajay Chankramath. Our guest has written 3 books on platform engineering, a discipline most organizations cannot yet define in one. Ajay wrote each one to answer what the last one had opened up. What makes a platform effective? Then how you actually build one, and now how you tie it to the business it is supposed to serve. He is the founder and CEO of Platformetrics and CTO at Platform Engineering Advisory and Consulting, with more than 3 decades behind him that includes head of platform engineering at ThoughtWorks and CTO at Brilio. His research these days is pointed at what happens when agents start showing up inside the platform. Ajay, welcome to the show.
Glad to be here, James.
Yeah, so platform engineering, I know that all the rage these days, and the sponsors will kill us if we don't say AI at least once, right? So we have to say that, and because they pay a lot of money for their sponsorships, and they want to hear about AI stuff. So we have to say AI a couple times. So I'm trying to get AI in here a few times. Okay, I think we've met the quota. Now we can talk about platform engineering. Well, I would be crazy not to ask an expert on platform engineering to give me their definition. So how do we define what even is this platform engineering thing? How do you define it?
Great place to start, James. So let's start with that, a working definition. And I'm sure we'll work through that for the rest of the conversation today. So to me, platform engineering treats everything between a developer's code and running that software as a product. So there is this set of activities that happens between developer writing a code and that becoming a product. This is a curated self-service layer with users, service level objectives, and a roadmap, instead of a pile of tickets or like an automation scripts or some kind of tribal knowledge, which is what we used to do since the advent of software. So the test is that word product, right? So if nobody like a product, just like any other product, prices it like a product and measures it like a product, it's not a platform. It's basically a bunch of tools. So that's basically a quick definition of platform engineering.
And there's been kind of a lot of people say that, not that I agree, but like platform engineering is just like when people ask, they quickly kind of just say, oh, it's just DevOps. What do you say to that? Like, what's the distinction there? What makes it totally unique from DevOps? I mean, I think it's kind of an evolution of coming out of those eras of DevOps and SRE and those sort of things. But how is it distinct?
I'm glad we have an opportunity to address that up front, right? So there's a bunch of confusion around DevOps and SRE and DevX these days and platform engineering and everything, right? So it's important for us to get those terminologies right. DevOps is not a team, not a product. It is essentially a culture. So think of DevOps as that philosophy about who owns what. And if you look at it that way, platform engineering is a product that answered to that cognitive load problem that DevOps created. Because when we first started with the DevOps culture, we had a great term for defining some of the things that we've been doing for years. And that immediately led to this space where you build it, you run it, you own it kind of a mindset.
Mm-hmm.
And the challenge was, if you are actually doing that, how does it really going to scale over time? That scalability required a certain kind of a product thinking where you say is that you actually bring in a set of capabilities as a tool or a product to be able for the DevOps engineers or who are to run that. I'm a big believer in not calling somebody a DevOps engineer, giving DevOps as a title for somebody, because DevOps is a culture. So your culture and philosophy can't be a title for somebody. You can be a product developer, right? You can be a tool builder, you can be a product owner, you can be all of those things, but not a culture owner, right? So that's the DevOps side of things. But it's also important for us to think about site reliability engineering or DevX. So SRE, as we know, is applying those software development principles to production. If we are applying those software development principles to production, that is different from creating the capability to apply those principles. And that is what that difference is. Now, the latest, or I shouldn't say latest, is what we have been discussing over the past several years has been this whole idea of DevX. And these days, when I go to LinkedIn or everywhere, I do see lots of titles as DevX engineers and DevX architects and things like that. DevX, as we know, is essentially improving the developer's experience to be able to get something done. And in order for the developers to actually do that, improve that experience, one thing you need is, again, those capabilities. So as you can see, platform engineering sits at the middle of all these terms. Platform engineering provides the tools, capabilities to make sure that your DevOps culture works well. It provides you the right kind of tools for the SREs to do their job well, to run the production correctly. And it gives you the capabilities for the developers to improve their experience. So that is how it all fits in.
Yeah, I think you brought up like the kind of the DevOps, revolution, that whole you build it, you run it era. And I think people, at first, there was kind of this, people embraced it. And it was, we were learning cool things, and the developers were even like, "Oh wow, I'm learning how to run all my stuff that I've been building," and it was kind of cool. It was a new thing to learn. However, as the day-to-day work started happening and the run part started to become more of their day-to-day, I think a lot of developers were realizing, I don't like doing this. I like developing. That's what I like, and I think so. Would you say that kind of platform engineering is a bit of a kind of an answer to that, maybe a bit of that pendulum swinging back towards the middle, where we're like, okay, let's make it easier for you to do those things and put some abstraction, between you and the machine to make this less a part of your day than it needs to be.
Absolutely. I completely agree with that idea, right? So the whole idea was, as you provided all these capabilities for the developers to be able to do it, one thing we didn't think initially is like, how is that impacting the cognitive load of the developer? Are we actually asking the developers to learn more about things that they don't care about? Because as a developer, if I'm actually a financial service developer for building some payment systems and things like that, my interest and passion for understanding how some of those core cloud services work is less. I'm more interested in my domain. I'm more interested in making sure that my product is doing what it's supposed to do. Yeah. So if you are asking them to go in and understand this million services that AWS provides or something like that, the question is that the best use of their brain cells? And what we have figured out that it is not. So what's the way to do it? Abstraction, like you said. So you start abstracting out the things that they don't need to know. And ever since I started doing building software nearly 40 years back, one of the things I've been taught, and this has been there even prior to that, idea of how do you make sure that you focus on the things that you need to know to be able to build the things that you need to build. You can't be a master of all, just like everything else in life. That this is true here too. So that was the whole idea. How do you let the developers focus on the right thing so that they are passionate about what they're doing? They feel excited about building the best products that they can build.
Okay, so you mentioned domain, and I want to jump to that topic because that is very interesting to me. However, I want to take a quick aside. You mentioned DevX, developer experience. And again, I don't want to make this an AI conversation, but it does beg the question with now AI taking over a lot of the kind of mechanical aspects of what we do in development. Is DevX dead, or is it evolving to like support the other behaviors that we need to do, writing specifications and figuring out, making sure the code is doing what it's supposed to be doing, all of those things, the wraparound things around that, the clickety clack that we don't have to do anymore on the keyboard?
My short answer to that is no, DevX is not dead. The way we might be using terminologies would evolve over time, as we have seen. And here's the reason. So if you look at the biggest impact that AI is having is mostly on the code generation side of things. And we can get into that a little bit more details. But that is no longer being argued. Everybody understands that you can generate immense amount of code. I could go into Plot Code this afternoon and generate like 100,000 lines of code that I don't have to read, and that might work well, right? The operative word there is that might work well. So
Might.
the question is, so the question really is, what is it that you can actually do to increase the level of confidence to be able to use AI? And that's where that developer experience part comes in. Now, the question is the role of the developer changing? Do we have multiple personas for the developer? Do you have a human persona and an agent persona for the developers? Absolutely. All of those things are true. When we talk about this idea of having a human, outside the loop initially, then we have like a human in the loop, then we are talking about human on the loop. And so we are seeing that evolution of how humans interact with the AI systems or what AI is doing. So one thing that does not change within that whole space is this whole idea of harness, essentially talking about how do you build that? How do you let the AI build it? This would be things like your context for your AI, your capabilities as to what your AI needs to build. This would be like, where does that execution happen so that you can see what is happening? The last thing, probably the most important, evals. So essentially, how do you evaluate something that's working? So to me, all those things are the harness side of things, which is where that developer experience still matters a lot. Platform engineering matters a lot. But just as important as harness is this whole paradigm of governance. So one of the biggest questions that all of us ask today is, what's the real identity of an agent? Should the agent be given an identity like you give it to a human developer? And if you're doing that, what is not just the permissions, it's the authentication and the kind of access and permissions to be able to do all of that. So that's one thing. The other part of it is security, right? So security, yes, would you want to have the core security paradigms and principles that you build at a bank that is a 60-year-old bank to an AI based on some context? Most probably not, because we are already seeing lots of cases where that is not quite working out the way it is. I'm not saying it's not going to work out in the long run, but today it is not. So that's the second part, the security. Yeah. The third one is something that has taken an interesting role by itself. If you look at observability, we have always talked about observability for the past 10 years or so. We have had lots of conversations around why everything should be observable, your application, your infrastructure, your cloud services, your business process, everything should be observable. Great. Now, there is another aspect of observability that brings in from the DevOps side of things, which is this whole idea of agent observability and how do you actually tie that with your human observability side of things. This is where your things like your token economics and all those things would come to play. So again, that's a long-winded answer to your question about is DevOps dead in the context of AI? So my aspect is no, there are so many other aspects to what a developer does beyond that code generation. That will be of huge impact to the whole paradigm of developer experience.
Yeah, I mean, I think the governance thing, I think we're waiting for kind of all the ideas to make their way down the Plinko board and finally settle on this. But one of the things, or two of the aspects of governance and specifically security and identity is like delegated authority. So if I'm a human being and I ask my agent to go do something for me, that is not carte blanche that it can always do that for me forever and ever. So I think there's a temporal aspect of some of this delegation, but then there's also within the context of an intent. So understanding what is the intent? What are you trying to do, agent? Oh, wait a minute. You had the ability to do that. James gave you authority to do that for him in the context of booking a trip, but you're not allowed to drain his bank account. Those sort of things. Like there's a couple little aspects there that I think, and I'm sure there are more, but those are the two big ones for me that keep standing out as there's that temporal, I told that agent to book me a flight last week, but what is it doing messing around with my, Sky Miles account right now this week? I don't understand what in the world. Those sort of things, I think, those are kind of those open-ended questions right now that I don't think people have great answers for. I've seen some frameworks here and there, but I don't know. I just don't feel like that aha moment has happened yet with those.
That's very true. Yeah.
So I promised getting back to domain because this is really interesting. On the prep call, you mentioned you've written a book on this. Your third one, domain-driven platform engineering. This concept is fascinating. So I know about domain-driven, design, the book, and you've the great book back in the day by, was it Eric Evans, I think?
Yep.
So fantastic. It helped us rethink about how we organize systems, how we organize teams around domains and all that. How are you applying domain-driven thinking to platform engineering? Tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you for bringing this up, because this is the topic that's of huge passion to me. And it's so timely that the book just came out this week. So it's a perfect time to talk about it. But before we talk about domain-driven design, let me talk about a couple of concepts, make sure that we are all talking about the same thing. A platform, as I mentioned earlier, is a product. I mean, we all have come to that agreement over the years. So its value is provable. If you talk about a platform, there should never be a question of, is this valuable, because you can't prove the value of it. Because most platform failures are measurement adoption failures, which is sort of wearing a facade of like a technology look and feel, right? I mean, that is how it sort of works. So a platform is a product whose consumer is mostly a developer as opposed to an end user. So that is a primary difference. And increasingly an agent, as we just spoke about, right? So a product implies a customer implies adoption. That can't be mandated, because you don't really go in and tell somebody who's buying a product from you saying that you shall buy that and you will do that. You cannot do that because you can't mandate that.
If only we could, right? How easy would that be?
Exactly, right? And sometimes we forget, when we do internal products, we do forget that aspect and say that, no, we have this positional authority, and so let's go in and ask everybody to do it. It doesn't work like that. So a product implies that something that can be proven, and new customer type implies all this harness and governance and everything you spoke about. So now coming to the books, right? So you talked about the 3 books, right? So the reason I ended up writing 3, there was never a plan to write 3, right? And this has all happened like by chance. So the first book that I wrote was about making a platform effective. Then the second thing was, once I talked about it, somebody came to me and said that that's good, but we don't have a lot of materials on how to build a right one, which was true. There was never a book prior to the second one I wrote, say like how to build one. So it talks about lots of abstract stuff, but how do you literally get a laptop, have an internet connection, and build a platform? So that is the second one. Now, the third one is the one that's most passionate to me, because that's where I've been able to map everything that I've done over my career, which is how to tie all these things to the business it serves. Because end of the day, nothing matters if you can't tie any kind of a technology work to the business it serves. So domain-driven platform engineering. So let's first define what domain is. So in this context, the definition of domain is almost exactly what Eric Evans did, 20 years back or something like that, right? So the effectiveness questions kept collapsing into effectiveness for whom, right? So when we talk about effective, who's it effective for? You might say for developers, at a broad level. But a payment team developer and a data science team developer don't need the same golden path. They don't need the same guardrails. They don't need the same service level objectives, right? Because the value from a business point of view is very domain specific. So a platform designed for that generic developer is optimized for the user who doesn't exist, right? I mean, that is how you should be thinking about it. So a generic developer fallacy is that killer of the platform adoption. So because one thing that I've learned at least over the past 10 years or so, ever since I started doing some consulting work, is people come to me and say that, we built this perfect platform, but we can't get anybody to use it. I'm sure you have heard it, right? Yeah. So that is happening because of that generic developer fallacy, because averaging the consumers ends up serving none of them well, right? And, this is a classic problem that we had figured out in different ways. But in the platform engineering world, I felt like it took us some time to get there because we are so enamored by the amazing technologies and amazing tools that were coming through together. And there's some unbelievably fascinating constructs like the team topologies and all those things coming together. And we thought this was fantastic. And we got enamored by some of those things. And we forgot that underlying aspect, which is like effective for home, right? So what does domain thinking change? So there's essentially the boundaries and the ownership stop following that organizational structure or the tech stack, and then start following how the business works. So there is a fundamental difference between saying that, my domain should be my organization. So I have this team. As a VP, I'm going to be worried about my team, or I'm, responsible for a very specific piece of technology, and I'm going to be focused on that. That's my domain. It is not, right? So because we have learned many years back that that's not how we define domain. So the whole idea of bounded context become those platform boundaries and the governance boundaries. So this is a key concept from domain-driven design. Now, different domains get different pay paths and different risk postures. Just like the payment example I gave you, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
Right? So what provisions in marketing requires, a review in payments, right? So essentially that whole idea of how some of these domains work is very different. And that's not an inconsistency in platform. So recently I was talking to a potential client about domain-driven design, and, just by throwing that word out there, the first thing that went to his mind was that, oh, are you advocating that we create more silos, right? The silo versus non-silo conversation is a tricky one. I don't want to go down that rabbit hole because I'm sure we have experts like Kelsey Hightower saying that silos aren't a bad thing, right? True. There are reasons why silos might be a good thing in certain cases. But the domain-driven platform engineering is definitely not advocating silos. It's basically saying that if you take your current product development space, the simplistic way, you have a foundation layer we have abstracted out in any product development, saying that, oh, this is the common thing that not everybody has to do. We will actually get that done for you. Now, there's this whole bunch of other things that you need to do in your product development. Those things have to be all bespoke, and you all go do your own thing. The simplistic form, what domain-driven platform engineering is saying is that let's move that level of abstraction. Let's have more of those things done in a common manner so that you have less bespoke activities. So what domain-driven platform engineering is advocating for is that let's have less silos by moving that abstraction layer to various aspects so that you do less bespoke activities, more common things.
Yeah, that was going to be like my next line of questioning would be around like how do you strike that balance? Because every team is going to. Yeah, I've done principal engineering work before, and you try to create these frameworks and reusable things, and of course, like you said, you're kind of watering it down. Least common denominator approach, so everybody's happy, but then no one is, right? How do you balance kind of that forking mechanism to say, okay, we have this commonality, but yet there's a little bit of a fork here for the payments team, and now we have a fork for the marketing team, and now we have a fork. How do you balance so that it doesn't become everybody gets their own bespoke? Because eventually, everybody's a snowflake. You know that, right? Everybody's team is unique, and they do everything different from everyone else, and they never possibly use common tools. I'm being facetious there, but how do you strike that balance with its platform engineering in particular?
Yeah. So the best way to think about it is that I like to put things in structure so that at least I can understand it, right? Mm-hmm. So if you look at that, going back to the previous example I was giving you with respect to what happens within a platform development of a larger activity of building that product, there are 4 specific layers that you can think of. You can think of multiple layers, but let's say start with 4 specific layers. The first layer or the foundation layer is, let's call it foundational services. So that is the part that we have historically said that is platform engineering, right? The foundational services. Mm-hmm. Right above that, built on top of the foundational services, what we call as those common enterprise services, right? So these are the kind of things that are common across various enterprises that you can actually do things. And then on top of it would be more of your domain backbone activities. These are more of your tech, sort of your team specific tooling activities. And on top of that is probably your custom application code. These are your unique domain services that are very unique to that particular domain. So what has happened is that with platform engineering, we address the standard infrastructure, which is your foundational services, and we left the rest of it, your shared services, which is essentially your common enterprise services activities and things like that you do, your domain services, which is more of those team-specific tooling, and then your custom application code, which is your unique domain services. We left all those things to say that go figure out, right? However you want to do it. Now, if we were to actually move that line that you're drawing to a place where you can actually start addressing some of your common enterprise services? And how do you do that? So in domain-driven design, as we know, there are very interesting constructs. One of the concepts that is this ubiquitous language kind of thing. Mm-hmm. So once you do that, your common enterprise services becomes that ubiquitous language, where you have your ACLs and things like that. Your domain backbone is where you would have things like some of your shared kernels or your bounded context and things like that would be within your domain backbone services. And that leads to this idea of having a team-specific tooling where you have things like your self-service catalogs and activities like that. Where shared services is where you would have things more of your golden paths that are specific to that domain, right? And that is how you shift that boundary to the level in which you can actually start seeing that this is the real benefit that you get from abstracting further.
I know a lot of the domain-driven design world is around kind of protecting those bounded contexts from one another. They are their own little kingdoms, and that's where people think that there's silos, but it's really not. It's kingdoms. But you have things like anti-corruption layers, and the ubiquitous language is only there's a linguistic consistency within the bounded context. Only there's no guarantee necessarily across bounded context. As you said, you have some of those shared kernel things that are common sometimes, but really those bounded contexts want to protect their world. Does that concept exist in the platform engineering world as much, or is that more of a services thing? Or I don't know. Tell me about that.
Yeah, I think the way I think about it is that this absolutely there is a parallel between how we have been thinking about DDD and how it actually happens within the space of how we look at this in platform engineering. Everything that let's look at maybe take this AI as an example. I know we always want to talk about AI, right? So if you really look at how LLMs are being used, the way I would think about it is LLMs are not those architects, right? They should never really make critical platform decisions independent of what humans are trying to do. Mm-hmm. So have to be scoped correctly, and the challenge is that sometimes they accelerate that scaffolding part more than you want to. So your API design validation against this ubiquitous language and some of those configuration changes, all those things would happen. So as you're really looking at something like this, the context quality is that first limitation when you're doing this. Now, how do you actually apply DDD there? So without those well-defined or well-articulated bounded context and some of those really codified constraints there, your generated output is systematically correct, right? But semantically wrong, right? I mean, so at scale, what will happen is that you can misunderstand those domain patterns, and then that'll start, once it's misunderstood, it starts propagating through every service, and that system scaffolds. So I think having that domain clarity before you actually invest in even an AI side of things is an absolute necessity, and this is how you would end up doing it.
Okay. One of the struggles, and we have it, we do have a platform engineering practice, and we work with our clients, helping them, build their platforms and plug things in and all of that. But one thing that's difficult is kind of, singing for your supper, so to speak, proving that this is worth the investment. The ROI is here. That eventually comes up. All the teams, all the platform teams are asked, okay, now tell us why we're investing all this money. Tell us that this is working for us. Tell us this is paying off for us. How do you do that in a structured way with these platforms? What's the best way to go about doing that?
Yeah, great question, right? So essentially, if you ask me, this is probably the single, common question that I get across the board, right? I mean, I'm sure that is exactly in your case too, right?
Yep.
So ROI is an interesting argument because people have tried to slice and dice it in so many different ways. And I would say a lot of those things haven't really hit the mark, right? So in my mind, if you look at ROI contextually, right, there are 5 different types of ROIs, right? And that is the problem. That is why the confusion is there, because somebody says prove the ROI. What they mean is prove something, and when you are talking about a different language. So the way I would think of it is like these 5 different ways of it is the first one is strategic ROI. So this is like, how is my business strategy impacted? That is that fundamental question. Now, on top of it is this idea of foundational ROI. This is where, is there an ROI for going down the platform engineering path? So when a business leader asks you, how is my business strategy impacted? If you go in and say that this is how it's actually, this is the ROI for going down the platform engineering path, you're not talking the same language. Now, the problem is, on top of that, there is a product ROI. Every vendor I know comes up with, here is the ROI for adopting my new product, right? So to me, that is a product ROI. Then comes this whole idea of attribution ROI, right? When this is where you talk about, is there ROI for adopting AI? And that is a big question that we get. That is a different type of ROI.
Yep.
So the last one is like, does it really improve DevOps? If I get my platform engineering thing in there, is that really going to help improve the DevOps? So when you talk about ROI, the first thing that you need to think about is that what ROI are we talking about? And is there a way in which we can communicate this in a really simple manner to be able to do something like this? So the way I've sort of built this, and we have built some tools and constructs that actually does this both objectively and in a subjective manner kind of thing. So the idea would be to look at it, say, what are your key investments to start with? And based on those investments, what are the key approaches that you'd have? Then, as you start scoping it, say that which of these ROIs sort of make sense and be able to tie it to which of these layers that we're talking about. So that is the biggest approach, biggest, I would say the best solution that I've seen when you talk about the ROI side of things. Now, there's other nuances to it, right? For example, if you're talking about, again, bringing in an AI, which is what a lot of the organizations are going through today, you have to look at, this is where that attribution ROI part would come in. You have to look at like, is it possible that the training of the team that is going to consume the ROI going to have an impact on the actual, consume the platform engineering capabilities, going to create the kind of ROI that you're looking for? Absolutely, right? If you don't have the team at a certain levels of expertise, that isn't going to realize that, realize the value, right?
Suboptimal at best.
Exactly, right? And it goes the other way too. So it's not just from the consumer side of things, but on the producer side of things. So we talked about this challenges today where lots of code generation is being controlled by AI and agents can do that. Now, if you really look at it from the point of view, all the other aspects of where an agentic approach can help, is it possible that your producer teams, your platform engineering teams, don't have the right kind of skill sets to be able to do that? So you need to bring in those things. So it becomes somewhat complicated at that level when you really look at all those levels. So which is why we have come out with a model, a construct that can actually, this is a tool that is publicly available, that people can go in and model these things and clearly see both the objective and subjective measurement of how that ROI is. But ultimately, ROI conversations continues to be the single most difficult conversation in any of these discussions that we have with platform engineering.
It's an observation that I have. I don't have any data to back this up, but I tend to see in business. It's an unfortunate thing that when I think of DevX, I think of people caring about the experience of their developers, right? That's kind of what I think about. What I've seen, anecdotally, probably at best there is that ebbs and flows about whether businesses care about that experience or whether it's good or not. And that's usually tied to how many developers are sitting out on the street wanting a job. The more of them that are there, the more supply that's out there of developers, the less businesses care about the experience of the developers they have right now. They don't pay them as well. They don't have to because, it's kind of an economics thing. But do you find that platform engineering takes kind of a hit when there's an abundance of developers out there and people don't need to care as much about DevX? Or I don't know. I'm just curious about that.
My perspective is actually been very clear on it, and I have even data around it. I don't have any data to pull up and show you, but at the same time, it really doesn't matter. The number of developers does not matter. What matters is what those developers are capable of doing. That's what it is. Now, what we are trying to do, again, with things like domain-driven platform engineering, is that can the developers focus on the things that they need to focus on? Now, the question is that need to changes, right? I mean, it differs from even within the same industry. If you take fintech or something like that, within that, how an SMB does that is going to be very different from a large enterprise does that, and how a startup does it. So now, if we have clear constructs that are defined like DDP, we might be in a position to say that you can actually reduce the impact of what a developer does by abstracting out as many things as possible. Still doesn't reduce the need for platform engineering. If anything, that increases the need for platform engineering so that you can have more and more of the right kind of focus going into the actual domain build out of the products that's happening.
What about, we were talking about ROI, I took a little aside there, but you hear a lot of people talk about DORA metrics. Are those is that still kind of an important thing in the industry? Are people, I know for a long time it was like, we got to get DORA metrics in here. We got to do that because they all red accelerate and they hopefully they red accelerate. And is that still the thing? Are people still, getting those dashboards stood up and paying attention to those DORA metrics? Are they still doing it?
So I'll start with the caveat saying that I'm a big fan of DORA, right? I'm sure all of us are. But DORA primarily is a lagging metric, as we know. The DORA 4 is lagging. So it basically talks all about the delivery, right? And it's a great case to be had there because there is tremendous data. You can't dispute the fact that if you get your DORA 4 right, your business outcomes are going to be far better. Mm-hmm. Now, the big problem is that a lot of the people that we talk about are developers who don't have the right kind of delivery perspective, right? Developers worry about what they do. So their challenges are more on the leading side of things. So if you really look at it from that leading side of things, the question is, am I actually helping them by providing a DORA metrics as about their deployment frequency or mean time to resolve something, right? So that's why I think, was it Microsoft and a bunch of researchers, Microsoft and all that, who came out with this whole idea of space metrics, right? Space is awesome. So space is something that has been a much, again, the way I look at space is that we ended up shifting left the whole metrics conversation and had a lot of those leading metrics conversations. So that is where we started talking a lot more of the developer productivity side of things, which is a whole new can of worms. I know that Ken Beck is probably not going to listen to this podcast, but if he is, we'll have some serious discussions about can developer productivity ever be measured. Mm-hmm. So while I was at ThoughtWorks, we used to have some really amazing discussions around like, what's the value of measuring developer productivity? Is it even possible? Is that a fallacy kind of thing? There's argument to be made both for and against. So, but that is the kind of metrics that developers should have cared a lot more or still care a lot more. But space is not as prescriptive as DORA, while it has shifted things to the left. The elephant in the room still remains when it comes to the platform ROI. How do you know if you are actually having value for building your engineering platform. So for that, I've said again at ThoughtWorks, I did research with Sridhar Kotagiri and a bunch of people in my team. We actually came up with a framework which has worked fairly effectively for really large enterprises. We call that PVM, that is published under IT Revolution, I think. This is a PVM stands for Platform Value Metrics. So the idea is that if you are investing $1 into building a platform capability, how do you measure the outcome of that? Both in quantitative terms, like that $1 translate to $100 or whatever, as well as the qualitative terms. And the question is like, why? Why do you care, right? Number one thing is that, yes, we care for it because of the fact that that can justify an investment that going into platform. Now, but what are those kind of specific things that you look for? If your platform is great, so what, right? That's where you really start thinking about, can you actually make sure that your innovation, can your team be more innovative? Can your team actually come out with far more innovative products over time? Can your team's developer toil be reduced? We always talk about the toil from an SRE side of things, production side of things. Now there is this whole thing of developer toil. How do you actually reduce that developer toil? So those are the kind of things that an engineering platform is intended to address. And that is what I would really look for from that metrics point of view. So what I'm really saying is, yes, DORA is good. People should use DORA. But just getting hung up on the DORA side of things is an absolute no. You should never do that. You should really expand your horizon to think about like, who are you actually providing this metrics for? And if you're talking about developers, talk about from a space point of view. If you're talking about the platform ROI, talk about PVM. Now, the question is, are you making this, are you diluting it so much that you don't have a business outcome? Absolutely not. In I think 2 of the 3 books I published, I have lots of materials that talk about how do you actually tie some of these metrics, PVM metrics, to the actual business outcomes. And if you can't do that, none of it matters. So this is a real clear way of saying that if I were to invest $1 into my platform activities for the next quarter, I can actually get 10x or $10 out of it by 3 quarters in 3 quarters by reducing my operational cost and increasing my revenue. And that is a kind of mapping that you would need.
Yeah. It's a pretty easy choice at that point. If you can say that those are the correct numbers, that sells itself. Well, I find it fascinating that there's still debate about this whole like developer productivity. I thought this was settled science. I thought we just decided that we're just going to measure lines of code, and that was the perfect way to do it, right? And the developer that does more lines of code, they're better. It's more.
Yeah, absolutely, right? So the Claude code who can actually spit out like 1 million lines of code is the most productive one, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Exactly, right?
Number of check-ins per day. That's a perfect metric. Yeah, that whole, there was a time when there was that lit up. And I remember there was some paper that came out. Somebody, is that like an Accenture or someone like that came out with a framework for developer productivity measurement or something? I don't remember.
I think it was
exactly.
McKinsey, right? McKinsey did this thing.
Yeah, it was McKinsey.
Yeah. And everybody blew their lid. Yeah. And just fascinating. Again, I can understand why McKinsey or one of those large consulting firms would do something like that. But again, not to really put anybody down there. But again, that is absolutely not understanding software development the right way in the first place, right? So I think that is a huge, huge challenge with that. And there are organizations who tend to measure these things at that level, right? At least, so one of the things that I mentioned to them when I talk to some of these folks is like, at least take that conversation to that next level and don't talk about just the lines of code. If you want to do it, but at the same time, see how much of that is in production. How much of those things have created the production issues? What is your PR merge rate? Because lots of PRs are ignored, right? I mean, so if you're ignoring the PRs, don't think that is any use to anybody, but talk about the PRs that are merged and talk about the PRs that have actually has had a positive impact on your product. So you can always take that lines of code argument and extrapolate that into something that is more meaningful from a product point of view. And that's where, again, a place where I feel like platform engineering is the forefront helping some of those things.
Yeah, that conversation about developer productivity, it's usually the reaction is, well, developers are lazy and they just don't want to be held accountable for anything, and they don't want to be measured because they don't want to be held accountable. There may be some truth to that, but I don't think it's as simple as that. I think there's a nuanced middle there. There's absolutely, we're out on Reddit. You know what I mean? We're checking out Reddit in the middle of the day. That happens. These things happen. Right. We don't want to be measured on our mouse moving all day long, that kind of stuff. Like, nobody wants to be big brothered like that. But I think there is more nuance to that. And it is a genuinely difficult thing to measure, because development, if people honestly think that the development time is clickety clack on a keyboard, that's software engineering, they're missing the picture. Most of it is up in your head. I mean, most of the work is thinking through problems and all that. I would argue that if you are thinking about the problem better, the lines of code that you write should be smaller, because Absolutely. You're doing proper abstractions, you're thinking through the problem and getting to its essence and those sort of things. So not only are you thinking and not clickety clacketing, so you wouldn't be measured that way, but then the lines of code that you're doing are smaller. You would seem to be not a good developer, and that's not true. I think it's the antithesis. Anyway, sorry, I'm soapboxing here.
No, I think that abstraction idea is exactly what we are talking about, and which we are seeing in all kinds of things, right? Even things like your open weights models and things like that you're seeing, right? I mean, the lines of code is like really, really small. It's all about the weights now. It's all about the configuration, right? So I think being able to think of it like that has been the advances that we have seen within the software engineering space over the past 30, 40 years, right? And that is the part that some people still tend to be missing, and we should really be fixing that.
Well said. I totally agree. So this has been, I mean, I'm glad I could have you on again. We could dive into a lot more stuff, but we do need to move on to our ship it or skip it segment. But this has been awesome. This has been eye-opening for me. I'm right. I don't know if you noticed, but I was like writing down notes frantically. Like, some of these ideas are like, wow, I haven't thought of that yet.
And you're so right. Each of the things that I was just trying to catch myself to not go really on a soapbox about all of these things. I got lots of opinions about every term I threw out here today.
This was really great. I'm going to come listen to this and take more notes and I'm going to have to research a bunch of stuff now. I love these type of episodes because it opens my mind to new things. But we do have to move on to our next segment of the show: ship it or skip it.
Ship or skip, everybody, we got to tell us if you ship or skip.
So we did talk a little bit about ROI, but there's a bit of I think there's a bit of a kind of a push in the platform engineering, the how do you prove the platform ROI by doing it the same way that you prove it, like product ROI, product line math type stuff. So they need to do like surveys and scorecards and those sort of things. Where are you on that? Is that a good approach to this, or is it not?
I would say ship the ROI requirement, but skip the scorecard way of getting there.
Okay.
So let me explain. I don't want to take too much time for each of these things, but I just quickly explain, right? So platforms should prove that financial value. So it's essentially what we are saying is that unmeasured platforms get defunded. Right? None of us can argue with that. It does get defunded. And hiding from the math is how like most of the industry ended up, measuring nothing. Right? We talked about a lot of them not measuring it. But DORA plus survey is in the ROI. It's that telemetry to do that. So pure cost recovery math sort of distorts the whole priorities towards cheap wins. So that's when I talked about the PVM or the platform value metrics. I said there is this both objective and subjective measurement in there. So the better accounting is capacity, right? Engineering days recovered, cost per service, adoption pool, time to value, right? Time to value. That is the one that we should be focusing on. But yeah, so I would say we have to ship the ROI requirement, but skip the whole scorecarding.
And I'm going to try to maybe echo back maybe what I heard and like distill it in my brain. Did I hear that it's like it almost reinforces the behaviors you don't really want, more short-term thinking and not more of a systems thinking mindset, these scorecard type things. You want them to think more broadly. Am I generalizing too much there, or is that
No,
kind of where you're headed?
I think that's it. So because if you really start going after your scorecard, you are actually going to be a slave of that whole scorecarding tool or scorecard itself. No,
Yeah.
I think it's all about that time to value, right? If the time to value can be realized some other way, and people have creative, no, engineers are creative and they come up with creative ways to do it. Let that creativity flow, right? But that should not be at the cost of not having the ROI requirement. Yes, ROI requirement is there, but let organizations decide based on all these frameworks out there what's the best way to do it. And I used to consult for a company where a CIO came out and said that SRE teams will report their own DORA metrics. And I was sitting there scratching my head. What does that really mean? If I had any more hair, I would have pulled everything out at that point, right? I mean, because the whole idea was like, why would an SRE team talk about their own DORA metrics? DORA metrics is related to your product, and at that point, we had probably lost the plot, right? Because of the fact that that person got enamored with that scorecarding ways of doing it. And that is the wrong way to do it.
Yeah, it almost kind of goes back to like the throw it over the wall mentality and not the that's where you get silos, that kind of thing for sure. Right? Anyway, all right. So another ship it or skip it. A lot of kind of platform engineering. You're seeing a lot of these developer portals. So that self-service mentality. What do you think about internal developer portals? Is this the right way to go, creating things that are self-service for the developers, or is it more you want to have behind the scenes automation? Like what does good platform engineering look like?
I would say you should ship the store, skip the shrine kind of a mindset, right? Essentially, what that means is portals are important. Portals fronting real governed self-service capabilities should be there. But a portal that's a link page or ticket queues, that is just theater, right? I mean, I've seen that, and I'm sure you've seen that too, right? Now I've seen really interesting ones. I've seen actually people building MCP servers over your ticket queues in Jira to actually come to Backstage and have that displayed there. That is absolute waste of time and money. Why do you do that, right? So you should be thinking about it like your self-service ships with policy as code attached to it, or the cost that sort of moves from queue to the cleanup. So I think you have to think about it from the point of view, why are you doing something? Just don't do, and there are lots of fun stuff that you could do with tech, right? If you throw, there are lots of fun technologies out there, fun ways to spend your time, but make sure that you spend your time for what's worth it. So absolutely yes on portals, but make sure that portals is doing some real job.
Wow. The whole idea of like, we stand up a portal to help you facilitate submitting the tickets for someone else to do the stuff for you, quicker, better, whatever. That's like, tell me you didn't read any of your books without telling me you didn't read any of your books. Okay. Yeah. That's funny. I'm with you. Yeah. I like the developer portals. I think that, of course, self-service is always great. I think where it starts to, the trick is always when the 80-20 thing, right? For 80% of the time, it worked for everybody, but then there's that last 20%, and that's the hard part to make sure that everything's exposed. You almost have to have like this normal mode that everybody can do, and then kind of that like gloves off, that advanced mode that I can kind of tinker a little bit and get under the hood a little bit and dig in. But with that, then you don't have a platform.
Exactly. So I think those escape hatches are absolutely important. The 20% escape hatches for your 80% golden paths are absolutely necessary. Now, if that 20% becomes 40%, then what it's really telling you is that you missed the boat on your pair paths, your golden paths. So let's go in and revisit your golden paths and make sure that your golden paths are there for those 40% of the people. But you can never get 100% done. There is not enough ROI for doing 100%. But don't forget about that 20% too, as you're really trying to do this.
Yeah, you don't want to be in the way. But you're getting diminishing returns by trying to every last morsel of that out of there. You hear a lot of folks when you talk about these platforms and portals and everything that this is a product. Treat it like a product in your organization. It's an internal product. You're just because you have users that are internal to your company doesn't mean that it's not a product. So, what do you think about assigning a dedicated product manager for that platform team?
Absolutely ship it. So this
Okay.
is one of the biggest things that I, profess in my book as well as everywhere I talk to, right? Because a large share of a team's claim of a product mindset comes from the idea of having a product manager, right? And the PM should also know their job, right? PM is not, when I talk about a PM, sometimes that's misleading because people think, yeah, it's a project manager, right? Isn't that the same? It is not, right?
They're the same initials, but it ain't the same thing at all.
I used to work for a company, and I'm not going to name names here and shame anybody. I made a case for a product manager for a platform team that was under me, and they kept saying that it's a project manager role. I have a project manager who has got a little bit of a bandwidth. Why don't we have the project manager be the product manager for this? Absolutely not. Very different things, right? We're talking about knowing your customer, ruthlessly prioritizing and saying no, saying essentially, if you have a right product manager with the right product management mindset, that is going to make your platform product far more successful than otherwise. So no question about it. An absolute ship it.
Yeah, I think, I totally agree. I think that we would be better off if we were treating more of our things that we're building as products and worrying about, are people going to use this product that I'm building. Now, one kind of maybe corollary, one aside here would be, I know, like, do you think that the kind of just any old product manager can do platform product management, or do they need a background that's kind of in the space, or what do you think about that? Is that a specialized area within product management?
I'm glad you asked this. I strongly believe having far more technical understanding for the product manager is important, which is why we tend to sometimes call this as technical product managers.
Yeah.
I think Google originally coined that term, but I've been using that at will. Whenever I talk about product managers, I talk about TPM. So what we are seeing, the best product managers that I've seen are the people who used to be engineers in their past life, who have built things, who understands technology. You don't need to be an expert at all of those things, but the ability to understand it, which is probably what most engineers need anyway today with the advent of AI and all that. That is exactly what you would need a product manager to have. Now, the fundamental difference between a typically, what we know as a product manager who understands a particular domain and trying to build a domain product is very different from a technical product manager. These gaps are actually, narrowing as we speak. I see a lot of domain product managers with good technical expertise these days. So there is no question about that. This is like how we used to talk about leadership in the old days, right? We say there are post-technical leaders and then technical leaders. I think that is an absolute crap, because you should really have, as a leader, if you don't understand technology, you're not going to be able to lead anything. You could be the best people manager, absolutely. And those skills are probably more important than anything else, that people management skills. But if you don't understand technology, you can't be a good leader today. And that is exactly the same principle when it comes to product management.
Yeah, I think there's an empathy aspect to that. There's an understanding. You hit the nail on the head. I think that, that's true. And I do think that there needs to be some kind of dog fooding aspect to product managers. Like, I've actually used products like this in the past. I think that does help for sure. Like I think we had cases where we're learning how to do product management for API products, which is different from a graphical user interface product, right? Some sort of a web or mobile product. It's a different mindset. It's a different way to connect with your user, and they have different needs, and their experience is different. So I think, I like that idea. All right. So when it comes to trying to drive adoption of these platforms, a lot of teams will take kind of the mandate approach. They'll say, thou shalt use this platform in order to drive that adoption. What do you think about that, the mandate approach to adoption?
I would say absolutely skip it, right? Because mandates in my mind buys usage, not adoption. So, and the usage they buy is usually something that people resent a lot, right? I mean, it's a minimal level of usage. And the moment you can make an excuse, a developer can make an excuse, they will make an excuse because it's inconvenient and I work around that. So I would say try and make sure that you go for this pull idea as opposed to push idea. So when I say pull idea, it's about that making sure that the option that you provide, the alternatives that you provide as part of your product, of your platform product, is far more superior than anything else that they've been doing. Even then, there is a challenge between a brownfield and a greenfield, because in a brownfield, a developer or a development team might have a process that is highly suboptimal, but they're so familiar with it. It's the principle of known devils, right? I mean, so you know exactly how that devil works, so I'm happy with that. So you provide this great new way of doing it. People say, that's all great, but I don't care. I don't have time to learn something new. And that's okay, because you always have that next green field to go after. But there are certain things that you should be thinking about incorporating in your mandate, which is things like your security baselines, your compliance, the kind of governance activities that you need to bring in. So those things have to be an incentive for even to the brownfield folks to say that, oh, this is the reason I should be using the platform, because that actually gives me a whole bunch of things out of the box according to the compliance so that my product does not have to wait around for it to be fully baked. That's the way you should be thinking about it. So if you think that a tool has to be mandated, that is telling you something that the tool is not good enough, right? That's how I would think about it.
Yeah, I love how you say that, like kind of a pull-based versus a push-based. And my, Grandma Carmen would say you can catch a lot more flies with honey than you can vinegar. That kind of a mentality.
Oh, that's great. That's awesome. Yeah.
That's how she would phrase that. But she was from the country, and that's how she made things up that way. But no, I totally agree. Make the easy thing, or make the right thing to do the easy, make it easy to do the right thing. Whatever, I forget how the phrase goes, but that concept applies. But I love how you pointed out that like those non-negotiables are kind of those fundamental requirements of like the security and the governance and those sort of things. Those are there as kind of those guardrails. And when developers look at those are usually the toil. Those are the things we don't like doing anyway. So when you tell me, oh, by the way, all of these other things that are a huge pain and no fun to play around with, the security and all those things, those are handled for you. I'm like, oh, then sign me up. Like, absolutely. So yeah, I think that approach is absolutely the right way to go. Totally agree. I don't argue with my guests very often. It happens, but not very often. It's because we have really smart guests. And anyway. Okay. Well, that does it for Ship It or Skip It. We did 4. That's pretty good. We usually only get a few of them in there. That was really good. Now, we're moving on to our lightning round. And this is just like you would expect, quick answers, but don't let it fool you. This is the most important part of the show. This is, all of the answers that you've given thus far, they don't really mean much, right? I mean, they're not right or wrong. Nobody knows. We have no idea what you're saying is true or not. But in the lightning round, they are, right? There are right answers. There are wrong answers. You are scored. We run what your answers are. We run it through this algorithm. We will share your score with you in a couple of months. Takes a little bit to get this compiled, but we'll get back with you on that. I want to make sure that you're mentally prepared for the lightning round.
No pressure, James. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, I mean, you've been warned. So let's dive in here and let's see what we can get into. What kind of milk do you put in your cereal?
Almond milk.
Okay, almond milk. It's good. It's a solid answer. I mean, I say this like I know. I have no idea. I didn't write the algorithm, so I don't know if that. But I like it. Would you ever go to a movie alone?
I would.
Yeah. I have a cool picture. I took a selfie. I was in Detroit, Michigan for work. I was working up there, and not only was I alone, I didn't go with a group. I went to go see a movie, but there was no one else in the theater. That was kind of weird. It was like, it was kind of cool. I had a whole theater to myself.
I'm going to follow that up and ask, like, what kind of a movie was that?
I think it was like one that had been out a while, but it was, yeah. Usually they weren't that bad, but I'd go in the middle of the week too. So, while I was up there for business, but it was, Novi, Michigan is where I was doing it. I love that town. Okay. Let's see. Let's move on to, how would you rate your karaoke skills on a scale of 1 to Mariah Carey?
How about minus 100?
Minus 100. Minus. Okay. All right. That's fair. And yeah, I do like to tell people, if you need to alter the scale for, that's fine. You don't need to stick to the scale. What would you say is the lamest, and I'm going to do air quotes here, dessert that people try to pass off as a dessert, but you're like, I don't think so. What do you think?
Oh, that's tough competition. I would say baked Alaska. So
baked Alaska. Okay. Mm-hmm. I don't even know what that one is. What's in baked Alaska?
You should look it up. Yeah.
Okay. Not good? Okay. Have you ever worn socks with sandals?
All the time. All the time. Summer is the time to do exactly that. So
I do that. I mean, I'm a dad, so I kind of, it just goes, it's part of the dad starter pack. You get some socks and sandals as part of it. I have to do it. But I find myself doing that. I'll go out in the garage and slip on some sandals and go do something. Yeah. Is double dipping at a party ever acceptable?
It is not.
It is not.
George Costanza comes to mind, but no, it is not.
Good. You got the reference. Now, what if it's like it's like the end of the night? They're cleaning up. They're about to throw everything. I mean, like if you do one last dip and right before they're about to throw it, maybe. But that's
only if you're drunk, I would say.
So. Okay, that's fair. Yeah, I think that's fair. What's your favorite junk food? Like, what are you reaching for? If you want some junk food, what are you grabbing?
Trying to resist that all the time, but usually it's nachos, some kind of nachos.
That's a good call. Are you a cake or pie kind of a guy if you had to choose one or the other?
Oh, cake any day. Cake any day.
No kidding. Okay. That's a lot. That's one of the most common answers. Speaking of common answers, we have asked a lot of guests over the last, I don't even know how many months now, many months. We've had kind of a running thing here. We try to ask the same question if I remember to do it. Do you like the smell of gasoline?
I do like the smell of gasoline. I don't think I've ever said that out and aloud any time in the past, but I do like it. Yeah.
And that's one thing I love about the / When we ask that question, it is almost invariably there's a pause. And it's like, wait a minute, am I okay to say this, that I do?
Yeah.
Like, it's weird. And most everyone says yes, which is weird. But it's usually like, and I explain it, it's like it's associative. It's like, I do like the smell of gasoline. My dad and I used to go out hunting and we would stop in the morning and fill up the gas tank. And I always remember, we were going, spending time with my dad or grandpa or something like that. It was always associative. I don't know.
Yeah. But being from Colorado, I'm always like thinking twice about answering these things because people jump to conclusions, right?
I can see that. Yeah. I can see that. But that's a common pattern. When we ask that question, people usually take a little bit of a pause and they're like, wait a minute. My answer is yes, I do, but why? And it's a self-realization. They're like, what is wrong with me for a second? But most people like the smell of gasoline. All right, let's try a couple more here. When eating a formal meal with forks, do you start from the outside and move your way in to the other fork, or you start with the fork closest to the plate and move your way out?
I have absolutely no idea how to do it, so I just do it however I feel like it.
Yeah, I usually look for the fanciest person at the table and see what they do. I try to scope it out before the food comes. And every now and then I get caught off guard and they already have their fork in their hand. I'm like, what did they do? I don't know. Yeah, I have no idea.
Fortunately, nobody has told me about any of those things so far, right? I mean, I just do it the way I feel like it. And you are smart enough to look at the most fancy person on the table. I don't even do that. I just pick up the fork and eat it.
Now, you're from Colorado, so you don't get as much leniency, I think, or you wouldn't get as much as I would. I'm from Kentucky. Like, they're just surprised I have shoes on and teeth. You know what I mean? Like, so I usually get a little more grace there. So, but you're there's some fancy people in Colorado, so you may not get as much grace as I do. And okay, you're from Colorado, so maybe I know the answer to this one. Depends on where you're in Colorado. If you're in Boulder, then I definitely know the answer to this. Do you own a bicycle?
I do.
If you're in Boulder, I think you have to. It's like issued when you move in, isn't it? Is
Yeah,
that the town that ever?
something like that. Yeah.
And what part of Colorado? Where are you located?
I'm in Broomfield, about 10 minutes, 15 minutes from Boulder. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So Okie dokie. All right. Well, that wraps up the lightning round. Again, I feel like you did pretty well. I feel good about it. I feel good about your chances here.
Fingers crossed that I would pass. Yeah.
Yeah. I feel confident in at least a passing score. I think you'll be okay. Now, we're wrapping up here. Anything that you've got like coming up? You already mentioned the book. It's called. Tell us about the book and where can we get it?
Yeah. So the domain-driven platform engineering book is out this week. It's available on Amazon as well as on the publisher's site, the Springer Press. All my books are available on Amazon. So the first book is Effective Platform Engineering. I co-wrote with a couple of my very, very smart colleagues at ThoughtWorks, members of my team there. That was published by Manning. That's available on Amazon. The second book that came out a couple of months back, which is something I'm super proud of because that has got about 50,000 lines of code that comes along with it.
Wow.
And that's called Platform Engineer's Handbook. That's the doing book. So that is from Pact, and that's also available on Amazon. So yeah, so check out my books, and that should actually give you that whole journey from architecting to building to tying it with the business. Yeah.
Very cool. So you went Manning, Pact, and now A-Press.
Absolutely.
Nice. All right. I see the book here on Amazon. I think it's, at least on where I am, it still tells me to pre-order, but it's coming out like very, very imminently, right?
It has come out. So I think Amazon probably needs to update the date. If you pre-order it, or if you order it today, you should be getting it within the next few days. Yeah.
Okay, fantastic. Anything else? What about are you speaking at any conferences coming up? Do you have any product releases of anything you're working on? What anything like that?
Yeah, this is a truly exciting time. So as you mentioned in the intro, I'm currently running the Platform Engineering Consulting, which is essentially the consulting wing of platform engineering community of about 300,000 platform engineers from around the world. So we do a lot of work within this whole idea of Platform Con. Last month we had this huge Platform Con flagship week where we actually had one event in London. After a couple of days after that, we did an event in New York. And throughout the week, we had virtual events. So we got lots of new Platform Cons coming up. We have a Platform Con Paris coming up in September. We have a Platform Con Sao Paulo coming up in October. And we have a Platform Con Sydney coming up in November. And then we have this Platform Con and Agentic Con. That is another one of the things that we do coming up in San Jose for the first time in the February of next year. So lots of very interesting platform-related discussions that are happening as we look ahead.
Okay. And maybe just quickly, help me sell to people who might have to approve budget the idea that I need to be at Paris, Sao Paulo, and Sydney, all three. Like how can I justify? Because those are awesome locations, man. That's That's going to be really cool. I want to go to all of them. So how do I sell that?
So this is the best way to sell it, like one-liner to sell it. In order for your product to be successful, you need to build your foundations right. And nobody builds the foundations the same way, but there is lots of common patterns across the board. So being at these three distinct locations, I would throw in the San Jose too, the fourth one.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So these four different places would give you that exact kind of viewpoints, the perspectives from the leaders from around the world who are actually doing it today. And you can't get that anywhere other than this place, because when it comes to platform engineering, Platform Con is the thing, and this is where you need to be.
I love it. I'm going to take this and cut it out and send it to the powers that be, and I'm going to try to get. I got to try to get to one of these, especially some of the Paris would be really cool. Well, I think that's it. If people want to get in touch with you, how would they go about doing that?
Best way is to reach me out on LinkedIn.
Okay.
Or if they want to reach out to me or email, they can always do that, ajay@platformengineering.org. Very simple. Everybody knows platformengineering.org, so it's basically ajay@platformengineering.org. But yeah, looking forward.
And Ajay is AJAY. Thank you so much for being on. This has been a fantastic conversation. I want to have you on again and talk more about it, because I think there's a bunch of different stuff we could like dive into. But I'd love to have you on again if you have the time, because this has been a great episode. I really enjoyed it, and I've learned a ton. So thank you for coming.
Of course, it was so much fun talking to you.
All right. And if you'd like to get in touch with us here at the /, drop us a line at the /@calibrity.com. See you next time. The / podcast is created by Calibrity. The / team is director and producer Ryan Wilson, editing by Steve Baradelli, marketing support by Taylor Blessing, and I'm your host, James Carman. Thanks for listening.